All right, we are live with another edition of Football with Faria, a morning edition, because there is plenty to talk about today on this Friday before Wild Card Weekend. So let's get started and let's talk some football.
It's time for Football with Faria.
You got to get the offense right, and you got to be able to be aggressive. They put up 14 against the secondary. That is driving me up a freaking wall right now.
Now here's your host, Nick Faria.
All right, good morning, everybody. For those of you that do not have to go to work or do not have to worry about anything, come join me. We're going to talk a bunch of different topics today on this Football with Faria Friday. A lot to get to today, right? A lot to get to, a lot to talk about, particularly surrounding the New York Jets. Jerod Mayo has now been hired by the New England Patriots as the next head coach for the arch rival, if you will, for those Jets. We're going to get to all that in a little bit. We're going to talk about the playoffs. We're going to give our predictions for who is going to win Super Wild Card Weekend. I still don't understand why it's called Super Wild Card Weekend anymore, but hey, who gives a crap? It doesn't really matter. And then, of course, we have to talk about the hoodie itself. Bill Belichick out as Patriots head coach. It doesn't sound like he's going to be staying away from the game for very long. So where's he going to end up? Where's he going to go? Is he going to go to Washington, Tennessee, maybe one of the NFC East teams if either of those teams lose this weekend? We'll get to all that, but let's start with the news of the day. Jerod Mayo hired as the new head coach for the New England Patriots. This was surprising, and I think a lot of people, let me know your comments, calls, let me know. We'll have plenty of time to chat today. But Jerod Mayo was a surprise to me, and I understand that the contract that he had a succession clause, so this was already penciled in as something that was going to happen over the next year or so, whenever Bill Belichick left. But man, you're going to pick Jerod Mayo over Mike Vrabel? Tough one. It's a tough one. And I know that based on contracts, it's very difficult to get out of those type of things. But if you're Robert Kraft, and this is the one thing that I always say in terms of what teams should do after a long period of success, it's not extending the Belichick line to me. The right thing is not to go out and say, we need a Belichick clone, and we just need someone that's going to change things up a little bit, bring in some fresh ideas. If you're going to talk about success, you need guys that are going to think outside of the prism that has worked throughout that time of success. And the perfect example I have is the Eagles with Andy Reid, right? He goes into Philadelphia, 1999. They're the winningest team in the NFC for the decade. He leaves. They bring in Chip Kelly to bring in a fresh set of ideas and everything else, bring in a new system of offense. What happens? It blows up in their face, right? They win the division the first year, don't get back to the postseason in the next 2 years, and they go back to the Andy Reid tree. But then that doesn't even work the entire time. They win the Super Bowl. It's great. It clearly works out. But then they go and get someone from the Frank Reich tree. The fresh set of ideas sometimes is the best way to do things because it cleanses out the worst parts of a coaching tree. And we all know that Bill Belichick coaching trees don't exactly work out, right? I mean, look at history. It'll tell you. Josh McDaniels, Romeo Crennel, Joe Judge, Matt Patricia. These guys that are really good coordinators under Belichick aren't very good when they have their own staff to worry about. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with Jerod Mayo in his first year with the Patriots, because this Patriots team is going to be a lot different than the one Belichick left with. They're going to have a quarterback. They're going to have the third overall pick. There's going to be some transformative changes to that organization. But what does that mean for the Jets? What does that mean for a Jets team that hasn't been to the playoffs in 13 straight years, that has just been repeatedly screwed over by the Belichick-led Patriots? Whether it's him resigning a day after taking the head coaching job in 2000, whether it's Spygate not being able to beat him in 15 straight games. A lot of that stuff has to be taken into account. Because with Mayo, you are getting the extension of Belichick. He's his linebacker. He drafted him. He has only played with Belichick. So it makes sense that this is the Belichick mold, who's just a little younger. He's now the youngest coach in the NFL. You have to think that that's the extension. But yet here we are asking ourselves, are the Jets really far off from pulling off a little winning streak against these Pats? It's not exactly unheard of. If New England picks up a rookie in this draft class, a rookie quarterback, you're really going to take him over Aaron Rodgers? I wouldn't. And then you have to add in the fact that the one thing that Bill Belichick's teams have always done is use their defense to confuse young quarterbacks. Do we know that Gerard Mayo is going to run a similar scheme, a similar system that Belichick's going to run? Sure, they're going to run the same down lineman. They're going to try to do different things. But I don't think there's a guarantee that he just immediately jumps and it's the same exact defense, the same exact system, the same exact confusion they have with younger quarterbacks. I don't think that's a guarantee. And I think that bodes well for the Jets in 2024 and beyond. Belichick is gone. He's not coming back to Foxborough. And now that he's away, you have an opportunity now to rack up some wins against a rival that you have just gotten blasted by over the last decade. It's going to be helpful for the Jets. And quite frankly, if you are a fan of the Jets out there watching this program, I got to tell you, this is the best news you could ask for. This is absolutely the best news you can ask for. Robert Kraft, owner of the Patriots, didn't even go through interviews. Didn't go through an interview process. And a day or two after Bill Belichick is fired, they go and hire the defensive coordinator, linebacker coach, whatever title he is, because the Patriots always do these weird things with their position coaches. But they just hired him right off the bat. No interviews, no nothing. If I was a Jets fan, I would have been nervous if the Patriots hired Mike Vrabel to be their head coach. Because Vrabel has had experience and success everywhere he's gone. He was a Pro Bowl linebacker before he got to New England. As an assistant coach with Houston, he was a great defensive mind. Great defensive mind. And the Texans were really good under him. He goes to Tennessee. They get to the AFC title game. They beat the Patriots. They end the Patriots dynasty once and for all. And the Patriots didn't even interview him. They didn't even consider him. That to me is a mistake on Kraft's part. It's a mistake in the process. And it's more of, we don't want Belichick. We just want a guy like him. And that doesn't always guarantee success. It just doesn't. So with Mayo as the head coach, you have to think that the Patriots are going to be a little worse, a little less disciplined, a little less buttoned up, and that's going to lead to some more success for the Jets. For your calls, call in. We've got the link on the description below on YouTube. Give some comments, give some questions. We'll try to answer all of them later on in the program. But again, the big news of the day, and this affects the Jets whether we like to hear it or not. Because if you are New England and you don't interview Mike Vrabel, this sets you up for a disaster of a run. Disaster. And Mayo could work out. We've seen coaches that are young go through some lumps and then come out greener on the other side. We've seen that before. But have we seen a situation like this where a top coach in football is available and the team doesn't interview him for whatever reason because of a succession clause? I know, and I've heard people say that Gerard Mayo is well respected within that organization, but to not interview anybody else is a big mistake because you can miss out on some really good people. The perfect example, of course, is the Pittsburgh Steelers. When Bill Cowher left in 2006, the Steelers had a succession plan in place with Ken Whisenhunt. He was the offensive coordinator for Pittsburgh when they won the title in 2005. He had worked with Ben Roethlisberger, and the Roonies went through their hiring process. They went through their interviews, and the three finalists were Whisenhunt, Russ Grimm, and Mike Tomlin. And because of that process, they found a guy in Mike Tomlin, and they were so impressed by him that they let Whisenhunt and Grimm walk to Arizona. And it was very surprising. And a lot of people in Pittsburgh were surprised. Not all of them were happy. But obviously the Tomlin plan worked because they were diligent with their hiring process. I wouldn't call this diligent by Robert Kraft. I wouldn't call it. I would call it reckless. I would call it a little panicky. If you're going to make a hire right away without interviewing anybody, yeah, the succession plan is good. But to not do your due diligence when there's some really good coaches out there, it's going to be hard. And furthering that point is the fact, and the Jets are in this move right now. The Jets hired Robert Saleh, a defensive-minded head coach, to grow with a rookie quarterback. And it blew up in their face because they needed an offensive guy that knew how to develop quarterbacks. Saleh wasn't it. LaFleur, the offensive coordinator, wasn't it. And they had to go out and get Aaron Rodgers. Now, the Jets are obviously going to be in a better position than the Patriots for 2024. But let's say that Mayo brings in a brand new staff and he brings in an offensive coordinator that works well with whatever rookie quarterback they take. What's going to happen in 2025? That offensive coordinator is going to get a head coaching job. That's what makes the hiring a defensive coordinator to be your head coach so problematic. Because if you can't get a guy that knows how to hire offensive coordinators, that knows how to hire offensive play callers, you're screwed. That's why defensive coordinators aren't really picked anymore to be head coaches. Because they don't call plays on offense. They don't develop on offense. So the Mayo situation, well, I think a lot of it could be recklessness, and it could work out for New England. They could be competitive next year. The fact that they didn't even interview Vrabel or Harbaugh, Pierce, Ben Johnson, Eric Bieniemy, that's a gamble. That's a gamble to me. And I think the Jets are going to be able to take that and run with it. They have the coaching advantage now. For the first time in decades of this rivalry, the Jets have a coaching advantage, whether we like to admit it or not. Robert Saleh is a damn good defensive coach. Jeff Ulbrich is a damn good defensive coach. Nathaniel Hackett, obviously a lot of people have their concerns. Not saying he's a good coach, but can he produce a solid offense when you have a Hall of Fame quarterback at your disposal? For the first time in decades, the fortune has reversed. The Jets don't go in to that matchup against the Patriots with a coaching disadvantage. They don't go in with a quarterback disadvantage. They go in with the better quarterback and the better coach. and splitting the season series against New England, probably not going to happen. I think they could sweep them. I think they could. Because there's just nothing here. The Patriots have nothing. They don't have a strong offensive line. They don't have a strong receiving core. They don't have a quarterback. There's issues on the defense. They have some good defensive pieces, Christian Gonzalez being one of them. But is that enough? I wouldn't say so. We don't know how Mayo's going to look week 1. So right now, based on that, the advantage goes to the Jets for the first time ever. So yes, it matters. And yes, this Mayo hiring without anything, without interviews, without any process except for a contract that was negotiated in for a succession clause, is now in and ready to go. That doesn't look like a well-run ship to me, per se. Because you hired the head coach before you hired the GM. You want them in lockstep. Why would the head coach get to make a decision on the GM? There's a lot of confusing processes here with the Patriots. And I think Robert Kraft went into this saying, I'm going to get rid of Belichick and we're going to hire Mayo. And then everything's going to figure out because we're just going to rerun the Patriots dynasty with Bill Belichick light. And that's not how things work. It's not how they work at all. And it could be a big problem going into 2024. And maybe they're a little bit improved, but that doesn't mean they're going to be a dynasty again or a division champion again. They have so many holes on their roster. So it makes this Mayo hiring so confusing. Because we don't know what's going to happen. Getting some comments here from Lake Jet fan. Jets had a succession clause back in 2000, lasted 1 day. Yes, no, again, succession clauses don't always work out. And that's why I was surprised that Robert Kraft decided to accept it and say, yes, we have this plan in place, but we're not going to do any changes. We're not going to do our due diligence in hiring people. It doesn't make sense to me. It's not good business to just say, okay, boom, here's the plan. Interview people out of your organization. Try to find what works now. What worked for the Patriots dynasty 4 years ago isn't working now. It's not. You want Shanahan. You want the Reed tree, the Shanahan tree. Those are the two trees you want. And you went with the one that has probably the most dead branches on it in NFL history. The Belichick tree is one of just dismal performances. And Kraft has seen that history and said, no, we believe in Gerard Mayo. Okay. About 20 minutes into our program, talking about Gerard Mayo recently being hired by the New England Patriots to be their head coach on Football with Faria, a Friday Football with Faria. And listen, we've talked about Belichick, but the next question on this program has to be, where does he end up, right? Where the heck is he going? Because with all the reports out there, Washington is out on him because they want a young coach and GM to work together. Los Angeles, the Chargers seem to be hell-bent on getting Jim Harbaugh, which I know our friend Jason is going to be very happy about. Vegas, you have to think, is also in on Harbaugh, but probably really likes Antonio Pierce. Tennessee is in a rebuilding mode. Why would Bill want to go there? Atlanta, they're good, but they need a quarterback. The interesting thing with Bill Belichick, and I think this is where the Eagle side has to come out, right? Because there are people that want Nick Sirianni fired. I think those people are morons. I think it's incredibly irrational. But there are people that say Nick Sirianni is on the hot seat. Tim McManus of ESPN said it's not a surprise if the Eagles get rid of Sirianni if they lose on Monday night. But how about the Cowboys? We know Arthur Blank is going to want to go after Bill Belichick. There's a reason why their GM is not in the hiring process right now. We know this. But outside of Atlanta, the two other teams that come to mind are all playing on Wild Card Weekend. And Schefter, a lot of these ESPN reporters are teasing the fact that there are wild card teams that are waiting to see if they lose in order to see if they need to make a decision on their head coach. And the two that come to mind, obviously, are Dallas and Philadelphia. If Dallas loses in the first round of the Green Bay Packers, not only would it be the biggest upset of the playoffs this year, Dallas is a 2 seed. Green Bay is a 7 seed. No 7th seed in the NFL since its playoff format has been expanded has won against a 2 seed. There's no way in hell the Packers are going to walk into Dallas and win. But if they do, what's going to happen to Mike McCarthy? Because Jerry Jones is probably not going to be very happy that he can't get to the NFC title game once again. And most likely because of the coaching staff. So if they fire Mike McCarthy, is Bill Belichick coming to Dallas? Can Bill Belichick and Jerry Jones coexist? That's going to be a weird little marriage there, you think? I don't know if that's going to work out. It's very similar to Bill Parcells and Jerry Jones. Parcells wants full autonomy of his roster. Bill Belichick will want the same thing. He'll want the decision-making process for him. Jerry is Jerry. Are we sure that Jerry Jones is going to be willing to give that up? But then the other side of that coin. So if he goes to Dallas because they lose in the wild card round, it's probably not going to happen. But if they lose to Dallas, that's huge. Conversely, on the other side with Philadelphia, Eagle fans, they want change. They just want change for change. They don't like how this year ended, so they want change. It's irrational, it's dumb, it's whatever. But let's say Jeffrey Lurie, they lose on Monday night to Tampa. They fall and lose 6 of their last 7 games and says, we're going to start fresh. We need new voices in the locker room. And goes after Bill Belichick. Jeffrey Lurie from Boston, always enamored with the Patriots dynasty, has been involved in the Patriots dynasty, lost the Super Bowl, won a Super Bowl against them, and he goes out and gets Bill Belichick. Now, the word on Jeffrey Lurie is he's not Jerry Jones, but he's a very quiet Jerry. He's not going to be out in the press, but he's going to want his decision on his organization. And then he has a GM in Howie Roseman that is all about power. He's the best general manager in football for a reason. And he wants power. So you're going to pair Bill Belichick with Howie Roseman? I don't know how that's going to work out. What's going to happen on draft day? Bill's going to want defensive players, and Howie Roseman's going to say, no, we want our guys. We got our specific guys. The Eagles run things a little differently than the Patriots do. That's been well established. They run things differently. And yes, Bill is one of the greatest coaches of all time, and he still is a great coach. His defenses consistently are dominant every year. Consistently among the league best in points allowed. Consistently great. The problem with Bill, and the reason why he left New England, is not because of his coaching acumen. It's because of his GM. Because his decisions as an executive were so poor that they ended up blowing up Bill, the head coach. It's essentially what happened. But now, you're going to pair arguably the best GM of the modern era in Howie Roseman, who has built and rebuilt Super Bowl contenders in a span of a year and a half. 3 separate times. And we're going to sit here and think that the best GM and the best head coach are going to be able to work together harmoniously? I don't know about that. I don't know about that. And Sal Palantonio today, he said that he expects Nick Sirianni to stay. Head coaches who go to the playoffs 3 straight years, you don't get fired because of a bad month. And it's been an atrocious month. But I agree with that sentiment. I've been saying it all week on the show. You don't fire a head coach after an 11-6 year, the year after you make it to the Super Bowl. Nick Sirianni is not the reason they lost the Super Bowl. He's not. We can point fingers on they should have done this, they should have done that, they should have done this, they should have done that. You played the best quarterback in football, best coach in football, and you lost because your defense couldn't get a stop. That's not on the head coach. That's the fact. So, Nick Sirianni, with all the problems people have with him, with all the, he's a dick on the camera, he's a showboater, he doesn't know how to talk to the media and all that other stuff, he wins. He wins. So he's not winning for a month. He's 11-6. There are teams in the NFL now that would gladly take an 11-6 mark and dropping 5-6 to end the year. This is the new standard that Philadelphia has built, that they are going to be consistently great. And when they are not consistently great, everyone wants heads to roll. But the thing is, if we're going to change the way Philadelphia is seen, if the Eagles are seen, then we need to change our expectations on how we respond to when they don't. Because 11-6 is not grounds for removal for a head coach. The Jets went 7-10 this year, and they understood that the injuries that they dealt with were enough of a reason to give the coaching staff another chance. Right, wrong, indifferent, irrelevant. Jets ownership understood patience. It doesn't make sense, and this is why when everyone says Nick Sirianni's on the hot seat, I laugh. Jeffrey Lurie hasn't said he's on the hot seat. Howie Roseman hasn't said he's on the hot seat. We're just thinking they could be because Andy Reid was fired after a bad finish. Chip Kelly was fired after a bad finish. And Doug Peterson was fired after a bad finish. But what people fail to acknowledge in these arguments, is that those 3 coaches, the last 3 that have been fired by Jeffrey Lurie, all finished with losing records. Andy Reid, 4-12. Chip Kelly, 7-8. Doug Peterson, 4-11-1. And you're going to fire Nick Sirianni for going 11-6? Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. And I don't care how many Philadelphia media people need to vent and yell and scream like idiots to get this point across. It doesn't make sense. This isn't the same thing. This isn't the same as Andy Reid. This isn't the same as Rich Kotite. When Rich Kotite got fired in the 90s, they didn't make the playoffs. They're in the playoffs. They're playing a game in 3 days. There's no grounds for a firing, even with a bad month like this. There's none. VR Diesel with a great comment here. Great seeing you here. Here to support you. Appreciate it, VR. Appreciate it. Rambling on about the Eagles with Bill Belichick. Come join me if you want. You want to talk if your team should hire Bill Belichick to be the head coach? The funny thing I saw yesterday on Twitter, I couldn't get enough of it. There was someone that was angry about Andy Reid and saying that I can't believe our team is sticking with Andy Reid instead of going after Bill Belichick. Coach won a freaking Super Bowl. I really truly believe, and obviously Twitter's a cesspool. We all know it. But if we really want to look and consider and talk about logical takes and middle of the pack and medium takes, if you will, not the aggressive right and the aggressive wrong. This every take it needs to be somewhere in the middle. No, the Eagles are not going to fire Sirianni. No, they shouldn't keep everybody. But some incremental changes here and there are going to make this team better. And it's laughable to think otherwise. And it's the reason why a lot of Jet fans are still upset about Woody Johnson essentially keeping his entire staff. I've never argued against Robert Saleh being fired. I felt that he should stay for another year, get an opportunity with Aaron Rodgers as his quarterback. But I can't look past the fact that the team got worse this year. They got to 7 wins, but they looked worse than last year. You can't just throw that out the window. So it's always somewhere in the middle. What's the problem with the Jets? Well, they dealt with injuries. They dealt with ineffective play on the offense, if you will. Trying to find kind words there. Not all of that is Saleh. Most of that is Aaron Rodgers going down. But I'm not going to say that the Jets should fire him without even getting a chance to see how it goes with Rodgers as his quarterback. And the same thing with Nick Sirianni. There's so many similarities here between what the Jets have done and what people are yelling and screaming about the Eagles to do. Eagles want change. Why do they want change? Well, they went 11-6 and lost 5 of their last 6 and looked terrible because of a late season coaching adjustment made by Nick Sirianni. Jets want Robert Saleh fired because he's had 3 years and hasn't produced a winning season, hasn't developed an offense, can't find an offensive coordinator that does the job well. But there's excuses as to why either side didn't work. And there are reasons why both should stay. And again, it's if you're looking for, oh, the Eagles should fire, the Jets should fire everyone, everything stinks, everything's awful, that's not the show. If you're looking for, everything is great, they're 11-6, but they're going to go to the Super Bowl this year, and don't worry, Jets fans, are going to the Super Bowl next year. No. That's not the show either. It's somewhere in the middle. Every take, there's always a middle ground. There's always the fact within the opinion. People want Robert Saleh fired. Well, you're going to have to start from scratch, and you might piss off Aaron Rodgers, the whole reason why you wanted to come here in the first place. It's just not, it doesn't make sense to me. Neither of those sides make sense to me. Firing Nick Sirianni, firing Robert Saleh, breathe, guys. Breathe. But with Bill Belichick in the open, that's where a lot of this panic comes from. With Bill Belichick available, with Mike Vrabel available, Pete Carroll potentially available, a lot of this stuff is going to be head on fire. Fan bases want change because there's a chance to have change. Everyone wants Bill Belichick. No one wants to look at the numbers since he left Tom Brady. VR Diesel with a question. Where do you think Bill Belichick will go? I think the leader in the clubhouse is Commanders due to his history with the Naval Academy. I don't think that's going to happen. There are reports coming out yesterday that said the Commanders were not in on Bill Belichick because they wanted fresh blood all throughout. I know that they are in the final stretches of hiring a GM. It's either going to be, I think it was Cunningham or Peters from San Francisco. And remember, Cunningham is the Howie Roseman line. Peters is the Shanahan line. The top 2 most well-run organizations are going to get poached again. And I know Cunningham's with the Giants, but he started with Philadelphia. So if that's going to be the case, and they're going to hire a GM, and the GM's going to hire his guy, most likely Belichick isn't that, because it's going to be too hostile. Belichick's going to want his players, his coaches, and the GM is going to want to make it a well-rounded approach. Boomtown 89ers. If JD thought he had pressure to get it right in years past, all those years combined have nothing on how important this year is. Absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. The one thing that I will say when it comes to Joe Douglas, and again, there's always a middle ground. If you are looking at his overall tenure, and I was writing a draft profile last night about him, and just looking at the Jets' 5-year history, there's a lot of hits. Let's be fair about this. The 2022 draft class, there are teams in NFL history that have never been close to the kind of draft class they had. Haven't been close. And Douglas nailed all 4 of his top picks. Very hard to do. And we have to give him credit for that, right? The 2023 class, a lot of people want to get on their case about Will McDonald, but Will McDonald's looked pretty solid. He grades out very nicely as a pass rusher. Needs to get a little stronger, but that's where the offseason's for. You're not judging a draft class after 1 year. That's just foolish. So I think there's things that Joe Douglas does well, and there's some things that he misses on greatly. I've said it pretty much all week. I think he's an average GM. If I were to put a ranking on him, 16, dead average. Johnny with a comment. Nick, with the draft coming, would we go wide receiver or Brock Bowers, giving AR more weapons? Johnny, great question. I think it all depends on free agency, right? Are they going to get T. Higgins? Are they going to get Mike Evans? Go after Michael Pittman? Try to get another guy? All that's going to be up for debate. And I think it's going to be interesting to see where Douglas goes for that particular well. But if I were a betting man right now, I don't think they're taking a receiver or Brock Bowers at 10. Because I think they're going to get T. Higgins. They're going to require T. And that's going to allow them to go into the draft focusing and hammering down on the offensive line. Joe Alt, Fashanu, Latham, whoever you want, whoever's available. This is a great tackle class. Everyone says it. Great tackle class. And at 10, with the way the quarterbacks look, I think that's perfect. I think it's absolutely perfect. Another question from 89 is pretty much NFC title game minimum or bust for the Eagles, correct? I hate the way people look at this Eagles season. I really do. And it's not the Eagles that have made this team exhausting to watch. It's the fan base. It's exhausting. Everyone wants changes after a drive. A drive. They lost to the Arizona Cardinals. I'll never get over this. The loss to the Arizona Cardinals, there are people screaming and just going nuts on Twitter because the Eagles' offense doesn't look good. But they put up 31 points. The reason the Eagles lost to the Cardinals isn't because their offense was bad. It's because the defense couldn't stop a cold. So, no, I'm of the opinion that it's not NFC Championship or bust. I'm not. What Super Bowl losing team has gone back to the Super Bowl the very next year? The Belichick-Brady dynasty. Sorry, the Eagles aren't that. And to think they are, it's not a fair comparison, and it's just not fair expectations for anyone in this organization. The Eagles had the toughest schedule in football this year after being one of the last teams to play a football game, and guess what? They ran out of gas. That's okay. It happens. There have been collapses all the time with this. Pittsburgh started 11-0, went 12-4, and got blown out in the first round at home. Just 3 years ago. It's not the end of the world, and it's no reason to say this must be an NFC title game or bust. Now, next year, with a easier schedule, I think that can be in consideration. The NFC is still wide open, even with Caleb Williams coming in. We don't know where Russell Wilson's going to go, but I think it's more than fair. Just not this year. It never made sense to put a Super Bowl or conference title or bust insignia on the 2023. So it just never made sense. From Eric Barty, Vrabel as the Eagles head coach is a blessing in disguise. They'll sell as he's fixing the defense and get ultra version of Tannehill and Jalen plus reunites with A.J. Brown, who never wanted gone. I get it, and I understand the look of Vrabel coming to Philadelphia. Again, I don't want him. They're great coaches. They're great coaches. They all are. I'm not going to turn the page on a coach that hasn't had a losing season yet and has been to the playoffs every single year. Like, we've had this argument. I know a lot of people on Twitter, they follow me around. I'm not as high on Mike Tomlin as a lot of people are. Guy hasn't had a losing season ever in his NFL career. And a lot of people, including myself, feel it could be time for change. Nick Sirianni has had 3 years, and he's been to the playoffs 3 straight times. You know who hasn't done that? Mike Tomlin. 3 straight years. Tomlin went in 07, 08, and after he won the Super Bowl, didn't make the playoffs in 2009. It just doesn't make sense to me. I would rather keep the staff you have, change the defensive coordinator, bring in an offensive mind to help facilitate changes, very similar to what Andy Reid did in Kansas City, then start from scratch. Because you're essentially just rebuilding and retooling once again. It just doesn't make sense to me. Doesn't make sense. I'm going to roll through the comments here. We've got, we'll see how long. We'll see how long you guys want to talk, and we'll continue going. Is there truth to the story that Tennessee's GM said it would be too complicated to trade their coach and get a return, so they just outright fired him? It's not the GM that said it. It was the owner. The GM, for all that I've heard, was very surprised that they got rid of Vrabel. Very surprised. And you want to talk about poorly run organizations? Tennessee's got to be at the top of the list. Top of the list. VR with a question. What are your thoughts on Jets trading for Bakhtiari if they do not get the top left tackle in the draft? I don't think they're going after Bakhtiari. I really don't. And I'll preface that by saying, if they go after the Fuaga guy, the Oregon State kid, who everyone pegs as a right tackle, and you can get Bakhtiari for a mid-round pick, obviously no guarantee that happens, but if you don't give up an arm and a leg for Bakhtiari to play left tackle, and you get Fuaga for right, there's a lot worse offensive lines out there, guys. Elijah Vera Tucker can play at his natural position. Joe Tippmann can play at his natural position. The weak link of the offensive line would be Laken Tomlinson. I think that'd be pretty solid. And I'm not advocating for that plan, because I think that getting Joe Alt changes your entire group. Getting Olu Fashanu changes your entire group. But you can kill 2 birds with 1 stone, getting a veteran like Bakhtiari and Fuaga at 10 and solidify both tackle positions. And then maybe signing Mekhi Becton to a 1-year deal to be the swing tackle. Something to consider. There's a lot of options that Joe Douglas can go down this year in the offseason. They're going to have cap space. They're going to have a draft capital. They have the 10th overall pick with a franchise quarterback at their disposal. That makes them very dangerous. They can trade back. They can trade up. There's a lot of different stuff that they can do. Boomtown, here is us poor Jets fans want to make the playoffs. I agree. Listen, I've been around Jet fans now all year. I've been around Eagle fans pretty much all my life. I'm embarrassed. Everyone's calling for coaching changes at 11-6. A year after they got to the Super Bowl. I mean, it's almost equivalent to when after they won the title in 2017, people were calling for Carson Wentz to leave Philadelphia because he didn't have as good of the season as they expected coming off the ACL injury in 2018. It's just, it's mind-boggling, the nonsense that is spewed sometimes to that fan base. No, Nick Sirianni shouldn't be fired. He should get an opportunity to get quality coaches to see if he can fix it. The locker room is still behind him. It just doesn't make sense. Credible comments. You're going to be so much whining and complaining if we sign Bakhtiari. Listen, again, I'm not saying that this is the way to go. But there are a lot worse things they can do than signing Bakhtiari and drafting Fuad. There's a lot worse things they can do. Because that's 2 starters. 2 starters. Diesel, if Sirianni loses wild card weekend and C would be barbecue flames after next year. Seriously, guys. What coach gets to the playoffs his first 3 years, gets to a Super Bowl, has one of the is partaking in one of the greatest Super Bowls of all time, and then gets thrown out the door the next year because of a December collapse? And yes, it's a collapse. Of course, it's a collapse. Is this enough to just fracture everything and not rebuild? That's insanity to me. Now, if they don't make the playoffs in 2024, absolutely. Because then it shows they didn't have a plan once adversity hit. What happens in a season happens. Sometimes it's just not your year. And clearly, it's not Philadelphia's year. Clearly. They're probably going to lose to Tampa Bay. They're probably going to get boat raced by Tampa Bay, by all things considered. So, am I going to fire the head coach and put him on the hot seat right away? No. If they miss the playoffs next year with the improved draft capital they have and the improved cap space they have, yes, then there's grounds for that. But not right now. Not right now. I don't see it. I don't like it. I don't like anything about it. Great question from Boomtown. In terms of draft value, is trading number 10 and our 3rd round pick to move up 2 spots realistic? I love this comment because I've been suggesting it for a week. Yes, it is realistic. And the perfect example is just last year. Philadelphia traded up from 10 to 9 to draft Jalen Carter and had a pick swap for the 1st round and gave up a 3rd round pick. So if Joe Alt or Olu Fashanu are available at 8, you make that deal. You make that deal going away. For one of the top tackles of the modern era coming out? Absolutely. Absolutely. Joe Alt and Olu Fashanu change your franchise. Number one, it's an offensive player that's going to make Aaron Rodgers very happy. And you want your quarterback happy. And number two, it protects your investment of whatever quarterback follows Rodgers. So if you're going to stay aggressive, and I think the Jets should be aggressive, it's just, yeah. Get it done. Get it done, Joe. Get it done, Joe. This is available. Howie was able to do it. Howie Roseman was able to make that trade up for Jalen Carter. You are a disciple of his. Get it done. Get it done. Question from Johnny. With you being in the Jets room, the whole Coach Carter situation, there any truth to it? What's your take on maybe bringing in Getsy? I know a lot of people think Getsy could come in. I don't think any major adjustments are going to be made offensively. I do know that there are young offensive linemen that really like Carter. I know Carter Warren. I've spoken to him. I've spoken to Joe Tipman. Both of them really like what Keith Carter has taught. But that wasn't his problem, right? In Tennessee, Taylor Lewan and Ben Jones had problems with Keith Carter. It was the older offensive lineman. And based on that, I've been seeing Mekhi Becton sort of Tweet a lot this offseason. Maybe there's something to it. I can only report what I have spoken to with particular players. And the players that I have spoken to have said that they respect and love what Keith Carter has taught them. Now, is that enough for me to say he should stay on this year? No. Because those young players, as solid a season as they had, the veterans played worse and got worse later on in the year. And that's a problem to me. That's a problem to me. Credible commentator. Sirianni lost to Saleh. LOL. Yeah, well, you know what? My team's in the playoffs. Yours isn't. Enough of that. VRD's, I agree with you, Nick, about Sirianni, but isn't the rumor that he lost some in the locker room with hiring Matt Patricia? That's not the case, VR. Not the case. And the one question about Patricia was about Darius Slay's relationship, because Darius Slay had such a massive falling out with Matt Patricia that he left Detroit to go to Philadelphia. So everyone was going to be interested to see how Patricia would work with Slay again. And there were people that were a little interested why Slay opted for arthroscopic surgery on his knee late in the year, or all those other concerns. But from everything we've heard, everything that I have heard, there's not a break and fracture in the locker room. There isn't. There is frustration because they're losing and they feel that the systems are a little outdated. But you know what happens during that time? You don't fire the head coach. You adjust the system and you tweak the system. You don't throw it out to the wind and say, okay, this is dead. New shiny toy, please. This is not the case. Boomtown with a final comment here before I close up shop. Jets with no corners beating the Eagles, or 70-20 Denver Dolphins game, the crazier game this year. I got to be honest, there were a lot of crazy games. And I've been live for a lot of them, man. I've been live for a lot of them. The Jets' upset against Philadelphia was great. It was a great game, but it really shows that a lot of the Eagles' problems this year is not just coaching. The Eagles turned the ball over 5 times in that game against the Jets. That's not a Nick Sirianni. That's on the players not being more careful with the football. The 70-20 game, crazy. How about, you want to talk about crazy? Jets and Giants. I've never seen a game like it. Jets were awful all game. Giants finally took the lead. Giants are going in for a go-ahead field goal with 20 seconds left. They miss because their kicker's hurt. And let me tell you something. I'm going to be very quick with this. I'm going to go right back to the craziness of the Jets-Giants game. Jets fans want to talk about how bad Robert Saleh is as a head coach and all the problems and concerns that they have and the fact that he's not fiery and all this other stuff. I want you all to read the report that Duggan came out with from The Athletic. Duggan, who's the Giants reporter, came out today about Brian Daboll. Read it and tell me that you would rather have Brian Daboll and all his problems, or Robert Saleh keeping everything hush-hush and just giving everyone nothing out in the media. I take Robert Saleh every day of the week in his system. Every day of the week. But going back to the craziness of it, right? So Brian Daboll sets out his kicker, who's injured, to kick a game-winning field goal, put the game away, everything like that. Doesn't happen. He misses because he's hurt. Zach Wilson makes 2 throws. Didn't make it through all game, but he made 2 unbelievable throws. Sends the game in overtime. And the Jets win it in overtime. In terms of crazy finishes, that's the game that was the most absurd. And I'll put that up there with the Eagles-Bills game that went into overtime, and Philadelphia still hasn't recovered from it. That game was just absurd. I was there live. It was absurd. I've never seen anything like it in a football game. Ever. Philadelphia was down 17. What was it? 2 scores. Pretty much most of the way. Tied the game up. Went into overtime. Bills are driving. Eagles couldn't stop them. Josh Allen misfires. And then Jalen Hurts takes the game over. I've never seen a game like that. But that doesn't even pale in comparison to the craziness of the final 30 seconds of that Jets-Giants game. Absolutely absurd. Absolutely absurd. Oh, listen, I'm going to sign off for today. We've been on for an hour. For those of you that are commenting, thank you guys so much. We had a lot of fun today. I hope you guys all had fun. I am not going to be on for this weekend. Oh, very quickly. My picks for Wild Card Weekend. Give me, who is it, the games? Give me Cleveland. Give me Kansas City, Dallas, Buffalo, Tampa Bay. And I'm missing one. Who the heck am I missing? And Detroit. Dallas, Detroit, Tampa on the NFC side, Buffalo, Kansas City, and Cleveland on the AFC side. So, thank you guys so much. We'll be back Monday. We'll try to do a little pregame for the Eagles game. Maybe we'll do a live stream so you can see how absolutely crazy I am. We'll see all that. Have a great weekend, guys. Have a great time.